Abandoned, hungry, and alone, she steals to survive, but one wealthy man sees her pain. And what happens next will change everything. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The little girl's name was Emily, though no one in her family ever called her with the warmth or gentleness a child's name deserves. To her parents, she was just the girl or that kid, a reminder of responsibilities they never wanted. At 8 years old, Emily had already learned what most children never should: hunger, fear, and the sharp sting of rejection inside her own home. Their house was not truly a home, it was a cramped, peeling apartment at the edge of a neglected neighborhood. The wallpaper was torn, the floorboards creaked, and the air always smelled faintly of cigarettes and spilled beer. Emily's parents spent most of their days arguing, drinking, or staring at the television with empty eyes. They rarely spoke to her, unless it was to scold, threaten, or demand silence. What Emily longed for most was not toys or fancy things, it was something as simple as food. She often went to bed with an empty stomach, her small hands pressing against her ribs, trying to quiet the growling that echoed in the dark. Meals were rare. Her parents either forgot to cook or deliberately locked the cupboards, claiming she was greedy. So Emily learned to survive in silence. She memorized the creaks of the floorboards, the exact times her parents would slump into drunken sleep, and the moments when the fridge was left slightly open. At night, she would creep barefoot into the kitchen, her heart pounding in her chest, and steal a piece of bread or a bruised apple. She ate quickly, almost desperately, afraid they would wake and catch her. To Emily, food was not comfort, it was survival. One night, her luck ran out. Her father's heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway just as she held a slice of stale bread in her tiny hands. The rage in his voice made her freeze. "Are you doing? Stealing again?" Emily's eyes widened in terror. She wanted to explain, to say she was hungry, but the words stuck in her throat. Her mother joined in, her voice sharp and cruel, accusing Emily of being a burden, a mouth they never should have fed. The punishment came swift. Her father yanked the bread away and shoved her toward the door. Her mother, eyes cold as stone, hissed, "Get out. If you're so desperate, go beg in the streets. Maybe someone else will feed you." Emily's small body trembled as she clutched her thin sweater against the night's chill. She begged, she cried, but her parents were unmoved. With one final push, they forced her outside, slamming the door behind her. It was raining. The kind of cold, relentless rain that seeps through fabric and into bones. Emily stood barefoot on the cracked pavement, shivering, her tears mixing with the downpour. She curled herself under the dim light of a street lamp, hugging her knees, wondering if she would ever feel safe again. Across the street, in the glow of the city's towering buildings, life moved on. Cars rushed by. People with umbrellas hurried along sidewalks, barely noticing the small, soaked figure hunched in the shadows. To the world she was invisible, but not to everyone. Inside a sleek black car stopped at the red light, a man in his late 30s sat quietly in the back seat. His name was Alexander Hayes, the CEO of a multinational company, known in the business world for his sharp instincts and relentless drive. But outside the boardrooms and newspapers, he was a man carrying scars of his own memories of a childhood marked by loneliness after losing his parents too young. As he glanced out the tinted window, his gaze froze. There, beneath the flickering street lamp, was Emily, a child no older than 8. Drenched, trembling, her face pale with hunger and fear. Something inside Alexander stirred an ache he had buried beneath years of success and wealth. "Stop the car," he said abruptly. His driver looked confused. "Sir?" I said, "Stop." The car eased to the curb. Without hesitation, Alexander stepped into the rain, his expensive suit soaking instantly. The moment Emily saw him, she shrank back, eyes wide with fear, expecting another harsh voice, another cruel hand. But Alexander knelt down, lowering himself to her height. His voice was calm, almost fragile. "Hey, are you okay?" Emily's lips quivered. She didn't answer. She was too used to danger hiding behind kind words. Alexander noticed how thin she was, how her small fingers were trembling not just from the cold, but from sheer weakness. He pulled off his jacket and draped it gently over her shoulders. The weight of it made her feel, for the first time in a long while, something close to warmth. "You don't have to be afraid," he said softly. "You're safe now." For the first time in her life, Emily wanted to believe those words. The rain fell harder, as though the sky itself mourned for the child. Emily pulled the oversized jacket closer around her frail body, her small frame nearly swallowed by its folds. She still did not speak. Her eyes wide, wary, and too old for her age followed Alexander's every movement, trying to decide if he was another danger in disguise. Alexander's heart tightened. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals, faced ruthless competitors, and stood firm in the storm of corporate wars. Yet here, before one shivering little girl, he felt disarmed, powerless in a way that humbled him. "Do you have a home nearby?" he asked gently. Emily hesitated. Her lips parted, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. She finally whispered, barely audible under the rain, "They don't want me anymore." The sentence hit Alexander like a blade. No child should have to say such words. His jaw clenched, but his voice remained calm. "Who doesn't want you?" Emily lowered her gaze to the wet pavement. "My mom, my dad." For a moment, Alexander closed his eyes. He had seen poverty, heard stories of neglect, but witnessing it here alive, breathing, suffering was unbearable. He looked around at the indifferent city racing past, at the door behind which her so-called parents sat dry and warm. Rage flickered inside him, but he forced it down. Now was not the time for anger. Now was the time for action. "Emily," he said softly, trying the name he had heard her whisper earlier when pleading through the door. "You don't deserve this. No child does." Her head snapped up, surprise flickering across her face. Few people ever used her name. "Would you like to come with me? Just to get warm? To eat something? You don't have to be afraid, I won't hurt you." Emily's stomach growled loudly, betraying her silent battle. Hunger, exhaustion, and the deep yearning for safety warred against her fear of trusting strangers. Finally, with trembling hesitation, she gave a small nod. Alexander exhaled slowly, a quiet vow forming inside him. I won't let her suffer another night like this. He guided her gently toward the waiting car. The driver, startled by the sight of the soaked child, opened the door without question. Emily climbed in timidly, clutching the jacket around her like armor. The leather seats felt strange beneath her, too clean, too soft, as though she didn't belong. Alexander slid in beside her. "We'll go somewhere safe," he promised. "You'll have food, warmth, and rest. That's all for tonight. Nothing else you need to worry about." The driver pulled away, city lights streaming past the windows. Emily's eyes darted nervously at every sound, every passing shadow. Alexander noticed and lowered his voice to a gentle hum, almost like one would calm a frightened bird. At a quiet diner across town, Alexander led her inside. The warmth of the place, the smell of frying food and coffee, wrapped around her like a blanket. Emily clutched his hand without realizing it, her small fingers gripping his as if he might vanish if she let go. They sat in a booth, and Alexander ordered without hesitation: pancakes, eggs, hot chocolate. When the plates arrived, Emily stared at the food with disbelief, her eyes glistening as though she had never seen so much at once. She reached out slowly, afraid it would be taken away. "It's all yours," Alexander said softly. "Eat as much as you like." The first bite was cautious, the second faster, and soon Emily was eating with desperate hunger. Alexander watched, not judging, only aching at how natural this sight seemed, how obvious it was that this child had been denied even the most basic care. When at last she slowed, full for perhaps the first time in weeks, Emily leaned back, her eyelids heavy. Alexander took the moment to speak carefully. "Emily, I need to know. Is it true your parents pushed you out? That they don't care for you?" Tears welled in her eyes. She nodded. "They said I was too much trouble, that I ruin everything. They don't want me anymore." Alexander's fists clenched beneath the table. He wanted to storm to that apartment, to confront the people who could say such things to their own child. But one look at Emily reminded him she didn't need more anger in her world. She needed peace, safety, and someone who would not let her down. "Listen to me," he said firmly yet gently. "You are not trouble. You are not a mistake. You are a little girl who deserves love, food, and laughter. And if no one else has told you that, then let me be the first." Emily blinked at him, confusion and wonder mixing in her gaze. No one had ever spoken to her like that. In that moment, Alexander knew his decision was no longer a choice but a calling. He would not return her to the nightmare she had come from. He would protect her, fight for her, and give her the life she had been denied. But he also knew the path ahead would not be simple. Laws, social workers, and the dark shadow of her parents still loomed. Yet none of it mattered. He had made up his mind. That night, in a quiet booth of a small diner, a bond was formed, one that would change both their lives forever. The diner grew quiet as the night stretched on. Emily had fallen asleep against the booth, her small head resting on the oversized jacket draped across her shoulders. Alexander watched her with a protective ache in his chest. Even in sleep, her brow was furrowed, as if she were still bracing for danger. He pulled out his phone. There were two paths before him: walk away and leave her fate to a broken system, or step in, fully, even if it meant complicating his carefully ordered life. For Alexander Hayes, there was no real choice. "Michael," he said when his assistant answered grudgingly, "I need you to pull some strings with Child Protective Services. Quietly, tonight. Sir, it's past midnight. Then wake whoever you have to. A child's safety doesn't wait for office hours." There was silence on the line, then Michael's steady reply, "Understood." By morning, Emily stirred awake to the smell of pancakes reheated by the kind diner staff. She blinked in confusion at the soft blanket Alexander had draped over her while she slept. For a fleeting second, she thought it had all been a dream. "You're safe," Alexander reminded her gently. "Do you trust me enough to take the next step?" Her eyes filled with worry. Will they send me back?" The question pierced him. He couldn't promise what the law might decide, but he knew what his heart demanded. "Not if I can help it." Later that day, accompanied by a social worker Alexander had contacted, they returned to the apartment where Emily's parents lived. The building looked even grimmer in daylight peeling paint, broken steps, the stench of garbage clinging to the stairwell. Emily shrank back instantly, her small hand clutching Alexander's sleeve so tightly her knuckles turned white. "It's all right," he whispered. "I'm right here." The door creaked open. Her father stood there, unshaven, eyes bloodshot from drink. His scowl deepened when he saw Emily hiding behind Alexander. "Oh, so the little thief comes crawling back." His voice dripped with disdain. Alexander's calm was razor thin. "Is this how you speak to your daughter? After throwing her into the street?" "She's no daughter of mine," the man spat. "She's a burden. Nothing but trouble. You want her? Take her. We're done." The words made Emily flinch, though part of her had expected them. Her mother appeared in the background, arms crossed, expression hard as stone. "He's right." She's dead weight, always whining, always hungry. We didn't ask for her." The social worker's face paled. She scribbled notes furiously, though her eyes betrayed the same horror Alexander felt. "You've just admitted to abandonment and neglect," Alexander said, his voice low but dangerous. "Do you understand the weight of what you've done?" her father sneered. "Spare me your rich man lectures. If you're stupid enough to feed her, go ahead." "Good riddance." Emily buried her face in Alexander's side, trembling. He rested a steadying hand on her shoulder, his anger barely contained. "This conversation is over," the social worker said sharply. "We have all we need." She turned to Emily with a softened tone. "Sweetheart, you don't have to come back here ever again." For the first time, Emily's shoulders eased slightly, as though a lifelong weight had been lifted. Back in the car. The silence between Alexander and Emily was thick with unspoken relief and grief. She stared out the window, watching the city blur by, until finally she whispered, "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Alexander's throat tightened. He thought of his own parents, of nights he'd spent wishing someone would notice his loneliness before tragedy struck. He thought of the boy he once was, the boy who longed for someone to fight for him. "Because every child deserves someone to believe in them," he said softly, "and I believe in you, Emily." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from something far more fragile, hope. That night, while Emily slept soundly in a guest room of Alexander's penthouse, the first real bed she had ever called her own, he stood by the window, city lights glittering below. His reflection stared back at him, a man of power and wealth, yet powerless against the ache in his chest. He knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with legal battles, media scrutiny, and personal sacrifice. But none of it mattered. He had already made the silent vow: Emily will never be invisible again. And for the first time in years, Alexander Hayes felt his life had found its true purpose. Emily's first morning in Alexander's penthouse was like waking inside a dream. She opened her eyes to sunlight streaming through tall windows, warm and golden across crisp white sheets. The bed was so soft she had sunk into it the night before, hardly believing it was real. For a long while, she simply lay there, afraid that if she moved, the magic would disappear. Her bare feet touched the polished hardwood floor cautiously, as if it might scold her for being unworthy. She padded quietly into the hallway, where the smell of fresh-baked bread drifted from the kitchen. "Good morning, Emily," Alexander greeted warmly as she appeared, his suit jacket already set aside in favor of a rolled-up shirt. He stood at the counter beside a tray of fruit and warm croissants. Emily froze, uncertain. The rules in her old house had been simple: stay invisible, don't touch, don't ask. Food wasn't hers to take. "You don't have to wait for permission here," Alexander said gently, reading her silence. "This is your home now. The food is for you." Her eyes widened, searching his face for any hint of trickery. When she found none, she reached slowly for a slice of melon. The sweetness burst across her tongue, almost overwhelming after years of scraps. She looked up at him with something close to awe. Alexander smiled, but he also noticed how she kept glancing toward the door, as if expecting someone to barge in and snatch everything away. Trauma lingered, invisible but heavy. Over the next days, Alexander arranged for new clothes, books, and toys to fill Emily's once empty world. A team of staff fussed over her gently, measuring her for shoes, adjusting her hair, asking her preferences. But Emily shrank from the attention, unsure how to respond. Compliments felt foreign. Choices made her nervous. When asked what color dress she wanted, she whispered, "Whichever one is cheapest," not realizing cost no longer mattered. At night, Alexander sometimes heard her whimper in her sleep, whispering apologies to invisible parents who would never come for her. He would quietly leave the door to her room ajar so that the warm light of the hallway spilled in, a silent promise that she was not alone. One evening, after dinner, Alexander found Emily curled up in the library, staring at the fire. She clutched a book she couldn't yet read, holding it like a shield. "Emily," he said softly, sitting across from her. "How are you feeling?" She shrugged, eyes on the flames. After a pause, she asked, "Are you going to get rid of me too? When I mess up?" The question shattered him. He leaned forward, his voice steady but tender. "No, never. You could make mistakes. You could spill juice on the carpet. You could even break every vase in this house, and I still wouldn't throw you away. You're not disposable." Her lip trembled. "But that's what they said. That I ruin everything. That I don't deserve to be here." Alexander reached over, placing his hand gently atop hers. "Emily, listen to me. You don't ruin things, you make them matter. My house was just walls before you came. Now it feels alive. Do you understand?" Her eyes filled, but this time she didn't turn away. She let herself believe him, just a little. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, Emily began to laugh quietly at first, then with more ease. She discovered a love for drawing, filling pages with bright colors she had never known belonged in her world. She tried foods she had never heard of, her favorite becoming strawberry ice cream, which Alexander made sure was always stocked in the freezer. But healing wasn't a straight path. Some mornings she woke in tears, convinced it had all been a trick. Other days, when Alexander left for work, panic shadowed her face, fearing he might not return. Once, when a staff member raised their voice in frustration at a dropped tray, Emily flinched so violently she knocked over a glass of water, shaking as though a blow were coming. Each time, Alexander knelt down, reminding her, "No one here will hurt you, not ever." Behind the scenes, the legal process had begun. Lawyers filed petitions, social workers submitted reports, and the court scheduled hearings. The case was straightforward. Her parents had openly admitted neglect, but bureaucracy was slow, and Alexander's patience was thin. Still, every time he looked at Emily, drawing in the library or chasing the maid's cat down the hallway, he knew the fight was worth every sleepless night. One evening, as they shared hot chocolate by the fire, Emily set down her mug carefully, her eyes searching his. "Alexander, can I call you something else? Not Mr. Hayes?" He tilted his head. "Of course. What would you like to call me?" She hesitated, cheeks pink with uncertainty. "Could I call you Dad? Just sometimes?" The word lodged in his throat. He swallowed hard, blinking back the burn in his eyes. "You can call me Dad as much as you want, because that's who I am, Emily, for as long as you'll have me." For the first time, Emily smiled without fear. It was small, fragile, but it was real. And in that fragile smile, Alexander knew he hadn't just saved her, she had saved him too. Spring sunlight filtered through the penthouse windows, painting the marble floors in golden stripes. Emily sat cross-legged on the rug, sketching with colored pencils Alexander had given her. She was drawing a house with big windows, a tree in the yard, and two smiling figures holding hands. Alexander paused in the doorway, heart swelling at the sight. But his phone buzzed with news that shattered the peaceful moment. "Mr. Hayes," his lawyer said gravely, "there's been a development. Emily's biological parents. They filed a petition to contest the adoption." Alexander's blood ran cold. "They abandoned her. They admitted it." "Yes," the lawyer sighed, "but now that the courts see a wealthy man seeking custody, her parents smell money. They're claiming they were misunderstood, that poverty, not neglect, drove their actions." Alexander's jaw tightened. He glanced at Emily, humming softly to herself, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering outside her fragile new world. "They are not taking her back," he said firmly. Not while I breathe. The weeks that followed were grueling. News outlets caught wind of the case, splashing headlines about the billionaire CEO and the little girl he had rescued. Cameras appeared outside the courthouse. Some praised Alexander's compassion. Others accused him of using Emily to polish his image. Emily didn't understand the frenzy. She only noticed the sudden tension, the way Alexander returned from meetings with his tie loosened and exhaustion etched into his features. She asked one night in a trembling voice, "Are they going to send me back?" Alexander knelt before her, his eyes steady. "No, you belong here, Emily, with me. We just have to be brave a little longer." Her small hand reached up to touch his cheek. "Then I'll be brave if you are." The words both broke and rebuilt him in the same breath. In court, her parents appeared, scrubbed clean for the first time in years, coached by a lawyer who painted them as struggling but repentant. They spoke of financial hardship, of being overwhelmed, of wanting a second chance. Emily sat silently beside Alexander, clutching his sleeve, her eyes fixed on the floor. When the judge asked if she wished to say anything, Emily hesitated, her voice no louder than a whisper. "They didn't want me. They pushed me outside. They said I ruin everything." The courtroom fell silent. Even the reporters stopped scribbling. Tears brimmed in Alexander's eyes, but he stayed quiet, letting her truth echo. The judge nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Emily. That was very brave." Still, the process dragged on. Investigations, background checks, endless paperwork. Alexander poured resources into building the strongest case possible. Yet at night, when the world quieted, he sat by Emily's bedside, watching her breathe, reminding himself why he fought so fiercely. One evening, Emily woke from a nightmare, calling out. Alexander rushed in. She clung to him desperately, sobbing. "Don't let them take me, Dad. Please. I'll be good. I'll do anything." His chest ached at the plea. He held her close, rocking her gently. "You don't have to earn love, Emily. You don't have to be perfect. You are already mine, and I will never let them take you away." She buried her face in his shirt, her tears soaking through, until she finally drifted back to sleep. Alexander remained there long after, holding her hand. It was no longer just about adoption papers or court rulings. It was about giving Emily what she had been denied all her life: certainty, safety, and someone who would never walk away. And he vowed, with every breath in his body, that he would see it through to the end. The day of the final custody hearing dawned gray and heavy, as though the sky itself mirrored the weight of what was at stake. Alexander adjusted his tie in the mirror, but his eyes kept drifting to Emily, sitting quietly on the couch, clutching the stuffed bear he had given her on her first week in the penthouse. "You ready, kiddo?" he asked softly. Emily nodded, though her small shoulders trembled. "Do I have to talk again?" "Only if you want to," Alexander assured her. "I'll do all the talking. All you have to do is be yourself." She hugged the bear tighter. "As long as you're there." "Always," he said, meaning it more than he had ever meant any word in his life. The courtroom was crowded with reporters, their cameras clicking like restless insects. The judge entered, her stern face betraying no emotion as she called the case. Emily's parents sat at the opposite table, feigning remorse. Their lawyer spoke of second chances, of poverty, of love misunderstood. "They only need support," the lawyer insisted. "Reuniting this family is in the child's best interest." Alexander's attorney rose next. She laid out the evidence in calm, devastating detail: hospital records of malnutrition, school reports of absence and neglect, the social worker's notes, and above all, the parents' own admission that they had forced their daughter into the street. Then she turned to Emily. "Your Honor, this child has found stability and care in Mr. Hayes's guardianship. Removing her now would not heal, it would destroy. The judge's gaze shifted. "Emily, do you wish to say anything?" The room held its breath. Emily's grip on the bear tightened. She looked at Alexander, his eyes steady, his presence like a shield. Slowly, she rose. Her voice was fragile but clear. "They didn't want me. They told me to go away, but Alexander found me. He gave me food and a bed. He listens. He calls me special. I want to stay with him. Please." The silence that followed was profound. Even the parents shifted uncomfortably, their facade cracking. Alexander's chest ached with pride and sorrow all at once. He longed to scoop her into his arms, but he stayed still, knowing her courage had to stand on its own. The judge leaned forward, eyes softening just slightly. "Thank you, Emily. You may sit." After a long pause, the judge spoke. "This court finds that the biological parents demonstrated neglect and abandonment. While poverty may explain hardship, it does not excuse cruelty. The child has clearly formed a safe and stable bond with Mr. Hayes. Therefore, guardianship will be granted to him with immediate effect. Adoption proceedings may follow at the court's discretion." The words crashed over Alexander like a tide. Relief surged so strongly he almost couldn't breathe. Beside him, Emily looked up, unsure if she had heard correctly. "It means you're staying with me," Alexander whispered, leaning close. Her face lit up, tears sparkling in her eyes. "Forever?" "Forever," he promised. As the gavel struck, the reporters erupted in whispers and flashes of light, but Alexander tuned it all out. He wrapped an arm around Emily, holding her close as she clung to him with all her strength. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of being taken away. Walking out of the courthouse, cameras followed, questions shouted, but Alexander ignored them. To him, the world had narrowed to the small girl holding his hand. And when Emily looked up at him and whispered, "Thank you, Dad," it was louder than any headline, brighter than any victory he had ever achieved. It was, without question, the greatest success of his life. The days following the court ruling felt like stepping into sunlight after years of darkness. Emily no longer flinched when Alexander left for meetings because she knew he would always come back. She no longer feared the knock at the door because it wasn't her parents. It was friends, neighbors, or the staff who now greeted her with warmth instead of scorn. Her room slowly transformed from a guest space into a true reflection of her. The walls, once plain, filled with drawings she proudly taped up. A bookshelf grew heavy with fairy tales and colored pencils. At night, she tucked her stuffed bear into its own little blanket beside her, whispering secrets she had never dared share before. And sometimes, when she was brave enough, she whispered them to Alexander too. "Dad," she said one evening as they sat on the balcony, city lights glittering beneath them, "I used to think I was invisible. Like maybe I wasn't really here. But you see me." Alexander's throat tightened. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "I'll always see you, Emily. Always." But healing was not simple. Shadows lingered. At school, Emily struggled to trust other children. When someone laughed too loudly, she worried it was about her. When a teacher scolded the class, she shrank into herself, terrified the anger was aimed at her alone. One afternoon, Alexander received a call from the principal. Emily had hidden in the bathroom for nearly an hour, convinced she had done something wrong when another student was reprimanded. That evening, Alexander sat with her on the rug, eye level, his voice gentle but firm. "Emily, you never have to hide again. If something scares you, tell me. If you think you've done something wrong, we'll talk about it. You don't have to face it alone." Her eyes welled up. "But what if you get mad and stop loving me?" The question broke him. He took her hands in his. "Emily, listen to me carefully. Nothing can make me stop loving you. Anger comes and goes. Love doesn't. My love for you is forever. She studied his face, searching for the trick she had always feared, but all she found was truth. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was safe. Months passed, weaving joy into the fabric of their days. Emily discovered laughter, full and unguarded, when Alexander taught her how to ride a bike in the park. She squealed with delight as he ran beside her, catching her every time she wobbled. She discovered wonder when he took her to a bookstore and told her, "Pick any 5 you want." She gasped, overwhelmed, then carefully chose fairy tales, sketchbooks, and a dictionary, determined to learn every word she didn't know. And she discovered belonging when Alexander hosted a small dinner with friends and introduced her proudly. "This is my daughter, Emily." The word daughter echoed in her heart like a promise sealed in stone. Yet, late at night, the past sometimes crept back. She would wake in tears, whispering apologies into the dark, convinced she had done something to lose it all. Each time, Alexander was there, sitting on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair, reminding her, "You are safe, you are loved, and nothing will take that away." Little by little, the nightmares lost their grip. The laughter came easier, the tears less often. Emily began to bloom in the sunlight of a life she never thought she would have. And Alexander, once a man defined by wealth, power, and endless boardroom battles, found his heart transformed by the simple joy of being a father. For every contract signed, every victory won, nothing compared to the moment Emily slipped her hand into his as they crossed the street, or when she fell asleep against his shoulder during story time. She had been invisible once. Now she was his whole world. The courtroom looked different this time. There were no shouting reporters, no bitter faces across the aisle. Only Alexander, Emily, their lawyer, and a handful of kind social workers who had stood by them through the journey. Emily wore a pale blue dress she had chosen herself, the color reminding her of the sky on clear days. She sat on the bench beside Alexander, her small hand tucked firmly into his. Unlike before, she wasn't trembling. She leaned against him, calm in the knowledge that this day was not about fear, it was about forever. The judge adjusted her glasses and smiled faintly. "Today we finalize the petition for adoption. Alexander Hayes, do you understand the responsibilities of legal parenthood? That this child becomes your daughter in every way that matters under the law?" Alexander's voice was steady, though his eyes shimmered. "I do. More than anything, I do." "And Emily," the judge continued gently, "are you happy with this? Do you want Mr. Hayes to become your father, legally and permanently?" Emily's voice rang out clear, with no hesitation. "Yes, he's already my dad. This just makes it real." The courtroom chuckled softly, even the judge allowing herself a smile. She struck the gavel. "Then it is so ordered. Congratulations, Mr. Hayes. Congratulations, Emily. You are now, officially, a family." The words settled over them like sunlight breaking through clouds. Emily turned to Alexander, her eyes brimming. "Dad," she whispered, "we did it." He knelt down, pulling her into his arms. "No, sweetheart, you did it. You were brave, you held on, and now we're forever." The courtroom blurred into a haze of clapping and congratulations, but neither of them noticed. All that mattered was the embrace, the bond sealed not just by law, but by love. That night, back at the penthouse, a small celebration awaited. Friends and staff had decorated the dining room with balloons and a cake that read "Welcome Home, Emily." She giggled at the sight, her eyes wide with delight. When Alexander lifted her so she could blow out the candles, she squeezed her eyes shut and made a wish she never thought she would dare. "Please let this happiness last forever." And when she opened her eyes, she saw Alexander's steady gaze and knew her wish had already come true. Weeks passed, and the final traces of fear slowly faded from Emily's days. She thrived at school, her drawings now bright with color instead of shadows. She laughed freely with classmates, sometimes even standing up for those who were teased, her courage blooming from the soil of her own survival. At home, she filled the halls with songs she made up on the spot, silly and sweet, and Alexander cherished every note. His once silent penthouse now echoed with life. One evening, as the sun set beyond the skyline, Emily curled up beside him with her sketchbook. She turned the page to reveal a drawing, a tall man with kind eyes holding hands with a small girl smiling up at him. Above them, in childlike handwriting, she had written, "My Dad and Me, Forever." Alexander's breath caught. He pulled her close, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved me too, Emily, more than you'll ever know." She leaned her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I'm not invisible anymore," she whispered. "No," Alexander agreed, kissing the top of her hair. "You never were. And now the whole world will see just how extraordinary you are." For Emily, the journey from shadows into light was not just survival, it was transformation. And for Alexander, it was proof that even the hardest heart could be healed, not by wealth or power, but by the simple, unstoppable force of love. And so, the little girl nobody saw became the most important person in one man's world, his daughter, his pride, his forever. Years had passed, but Alexander could still remember the first night Emily slept peacefully in his home, curled against him as though she had finally found safe harbor. That memory never left him, no matter how much time softened the sharp edges of her past. Emily grew swiftly like a flower that had long been trapped in shade but now blossomed in sunlight. She was no longer the frail, timid girl he had first met on that rainy street. Instead, she had become a young woman full of warmth, creativity, and determination. She loved painting, and her art spoke volumes of her journey. Her earlier sketches had been dark, marked by shadows and loneliness. Now her canvases were vibrant sunsets bursting with color. Families holding hands, children playing without fear. Each stroke of her brush seemed to reclaim another piece of her soul. On the day of her high school graduation, Alexander stood in the crowd, clapping until his hands ached as Emily walked across the stage. She wore a sky blue gown and held her diploma with a pride that radiated brighter than any spotlight. When she spotted him in the crowd, she raised her hand and waved, her smile uncheckable. In that moment, Alexander's heart swelled with a joy he had never known in all his years of business victories and financial triumphs. Nothing compared to this. Later, during the quiet of the evening, Emily found him standing on the balcony, watching the city lights. She leaned against the railing beside him, her voice soft. "Do you remember," she asked, "the night you found me? I thought my life was over. But it was really just beginning." Alexander turned to her, his eyes damp with emotion. "I remember everything, Emily, and I would relive every second of it just to make sure I ended up with you as my daughter." She smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "You gave me a life I never thought I'd have. You gave me love when I thought I didn't deserve it. Because of you, I believe in tomorrow." He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You always deserved love. I just got lucky enough to be the one who could give it." Years later, when Emily spoke to groups of children and foster parents, she shared her story not with bitterness, but with courage. She told them about the little girl who once went unseen and the man who saw her, and how love had changed everything. And every time she told it, Alexander sat proudly in the back row, his chest tight with emotion, knowing that the greatest legacy he would ever leave was not his fortune, nor his company, but the simple act of opening his heart to a child who needed him. Because in the end, love was what saved them both. And the little girl nobody saw became the woman the whole world admired because one man had chosen to see her and never let go.